When the police forced open the heavy front door, the first thing that hit them wasn't the sight, but the smell. A sharp, briny odor of fermented fish cut through the air. On the polished marble floor of the grand living room, a deep red liquid pooled like blood, shimmering under the fluorescent lights amidst shattered porcelain. And in the middle of this bizarre scene sat the matriarch of the house, Choi Malja. Her expensive silk gown, meant for a lavish birthday party, was stained and ruined. Her eyes were vacant, lost in the void. Her lips trembled, releasing a raw, hoarse whisper. That girl, she wasn't mute. She was a phantom. She stole my voice, she stole everything. From the kitchen, the only sound was the insistent hiss of a pressure cooker, steaming away as if its owner had simply vanished into thin air, along with everyone else in the house. What in God's name happened in this magnificent mansion? Let's turn back the clock 3 years, to the day the seeds of this tragedy were sown. Seo-yin had married into this wealthy family not for love, but to save her own from financial ruin, a sacrifice that made her a possession, not a person. Her personal hell began the day after her honeymoon, at 4 a.m. In the pitch-dark kitchen, she was forced to wash rice, her bare hands submerged in icy water until her knuckles ached with a pain so sharp it felt like they would break. But behind her stood not a comforting presence, but her mother-in-law, Choi Malja, whose voice dripped with venom. Why are you making so much noise? Did your beggar family not even teach you how to properly wash rice? If you break the grains, you break your own fortune. It wasn't how one speaks to a new daughter. It was the disdainful tone of a master inspecting a new appliance, checking for defects. And what of her husband, Park Min-sik? He was the classic mama's boy, a man who had grown up entirely in the shadow of his mother's wealth. As his wife endured these daily humiliations, he would sit at the breakfast table, utterly absorbed by his smartphone. When Seo-yin pleaded, "Honey, your mother is," he would cut her off with a scowl. "Oh, stop whining. Just learn how to handle her. It's not that hard. You knew what she was like when you married me, didn't you? You came here for our money, so start earning it." That single word, money, struck Seo-yin's heart like a shard of ice. In this enormous, opulent house, she was utterly and completely alone. Under the constant barrage of insults, back-breaking chores, and cold indifference, Seo-yin's spirit began to crack. And then one day, she simply stopped speaking. At first, it was a symptom of a pain so deep that her voice simply wouldn't come out. But her new family's reaction was chilling. Instead of concern, there was relief. Her mother-in-law actually clapped her hands in delight. "Well, this is perfect. No more talking back. A mute daughter-in-law, so much easier to manage, don't you think?" In that moment, something inside Seo-yin went cold as stone. She made a decision. She would become the perfect, silent doll they wanted. But this wasn't surrender. It was the forging of a weapon. Her silence would become her shield, and her sword. From that day on, Seo-yin became a ghost in her own home. And here was their fatal mistake: they believed because she could not speak, she could not hear, could not think. They saw a broken toy. As Seo-yin quietly cleaned the floor, her mother-in-law would be on the phone with her accountant, loudly discussing their illegal tax evasion schemes. "Are you sure the 2 million is safely hidden in the offshore account?" "Her. Oh, don't mind her," she'd say with a dismissive wave. "She's basically furniture that moves." Seo-yin's polishing cloth never stopped moving, but inside her apron pocket, the tiny red light of a digital recorder was blinking, capturing every single word. Her husband's audacity knew no bounds. One night, drunk, he brought his mistress right to the front door. When Seo-yin opened it, the woman looked her up and down with a smirk. "So, this is the mute wife? Can she really not say anything?" she sneered. Her husband just laughed, shoving Seoyin aside. Yeah, think of her as a household appliance. A very quiet, high-end vacuum cleaner. Just ignore it. Seoyin bowed her head and quietly arranged their shoes, but her eyes, hidden from view, were burning every detail into her memory. Each insult was just adding interest to a debt he would one day pay in full. Even her sister-in-law, recently returned from studying abroad, used Seoyin as a silent confessional. She stumbled in late one night, pale and frantic, and when Seoyin offered her a plate of fruit, she slapped it away. Get away from me. Oh God, what if he's dead? I don't think anyone saw me hit him, did they? She needed to unload the terror of the hit-and-run she'd just committed, and who better than her mute sister-in-law? It was like talking to a wall. Seoyin said nothing, simply kneeling to pick up the scattered pieces of fruit. But her eyes were angling her phone on the counter, perfectly positioned to record the hysterical confession. And so it went, for 3 long years. Seoyin swept up not only the dust in that house, but every filthy secret of the people who lived there. There's an old saying that a good wife is deaf and mute for 3 years, a lesson in patient suffering. But for Seoyin, this wasn't suffering. It was stalking. She was a predator, waiting for her prey to become fat and complacent. Finally, the day of her mother-in-law's 70th birthday party arrived. In the kitchen, Seoyin sharpened a knife. Shing, shing, shing. The sound of steel on stone cut through the dawn, cold and sharp. Today, she would serve the beasts their final meal. On the day of the party, the house was abuzz. But instead of hiring caterers, Choi Malja issued a cruel command: Seoyin would cook a feast for 100 guests. Alone. We'll show everyone what a talented daughter-in-law I have, she declared, and save a fortune, too. Seoyin complied without a word. The house filled with the rich, sweet aroma of braised ribs and sizzling noodles. No one suspected that this lavish feast was, in fact, their last supper. And into each carefully prepared dish, Seoyin added her final, secret ingredient, a fine white powder that promised a long, deep, and dreamless sleep. That evening, the immediate family sat down to eat before the guests arrived. Her mother-in-law, husband, and sister-in-law devoured the magnificent meal Seoyin had prepared. Wow, the ribs are amazing today, her husband grunted through a mouthful. The mute sure knows her way around a kitchen. His mother burped in agreement. Seoyin stood in the corner, watching them. A farmer, observing the hogs enjoying their final meal before the slaughter. Soon, their chewing slowed. Their words began to slur. Their eyelids grew heavy. I'm so sleepy. Thud. Thud. One by one, they slumped over onto the table. The mansion fell silent. And then, Seoyin began her work. There was no hesitation. First, she pressed her mother-in-law's thumb to the fingerprint scanner on the safe. Click. She typed in the password to the hidden slush fund account and transferred millions into an untraceable one she had prepared. Enter. Next, her husband's phone. Every sordid photo and video with his mistress, sent with a single tap to his entire company, and to the mistress's husband. And finally, the sister-in-law's tearful hit-and-run confession, scheduled to be delivered to the police tip line at dawn. It was over. 3 years of unpaid wages and damages, collected in full. Her work done, she placed a single envelope on the table. She then pulled out the cruel prenuptial agreement they had forced her to sign, that slave contract, and tore it to shreds. The pieces fluttered down onto a plate of half-eaten ribs, like bitter confetti. She took off the stained, gray apron she had worn for 3 years and gently draped it over her husband's unconscious face. A final shroud for the life she was leaving behind. Then she walked out the door, into the cold night air, and never looked back. The sound of her heels on the pavement was a victory march towards freedom. When Choi Malja awoke the next morning, it was to a living nightmare. The safe was empty. Her son was on the phone, screaming that he'd been fired. The police were at the door to arrest her daughter. And on the dining table was the envelope. Inside, not a letter, but a digital voice recorder. She pressed play, only to hear her own venomous words echoing back at her, followed by a crystal-clear voice she hadn't heard in years. It was Seoyeon. "Mother," it said, "I believe I've earned my keep. From now on, you can make your own dinner." In that moment of horror, Choi Malja understood. She hadn't been the master of the house. She had been the livestock, fattened for the slaughter. The family's collapse was swift and total. The tax authorities seized their assets, and men arrived to place red repossession stickers on the fine furniture. The magnificent birthday feast was now a rotting garbage pile, swarming with ants. Alone in the cavernous, empty house, Choi Malja scraped the last of the cold, spoiled soup from a bowl, crying and retching. She was desperate, trying to find some trace of the daughter-in-law she had destroyed, but all she found was the sour taste of regret. The silence she had once celebrated had become the walls of her own personal prison. But far away from the wreckage, the sun shines on a quiet seaside town. The sweet smell of baking bread drifts from a small cafe called The Second Chapter. Inside, a woman with a chic haircut and a brilliant smile is on the phone. "Yes, your cake is ready. The message you wanted. A new beginning, looks perfect." It is Seoyeon. Her voice is as clear and bright as the morning sun. She was never mute. She had simply chosen silence, refusing to participate in their symphony of cruelty. Looking out at the endless blue ocean, she took her first deep breath of true freedom. Her real life, in her own voice, was just beginning. So, I ask you, how do you interpret the silence of others? Do you assume the quiet ones have nothing to say? Do you mistake their silence for weakness? Be careful. Silence isn't always submission. Sometimes, it is the most terrifying warning of all. Seoyeon's empty dinner table teaches us a powerful lesson: the ones who don't speak are often the ones who are listening the most. And when they finally decide to raise their voice, they can bring an entire world crashing down. This has been the chilling story of the mute daughter-in-law, and the mansion disappearance.